The gate loomed before them, its iron bars bent and warped as though something massive had forced its way inside. The padlock lay rusted and broken on the ground, surrounded by scattered leaves and shards of glass. Above them, the once bright sign reading Wonderland Amusement Park hung by a single chain, swinging gently in the cool night breeze. Lavra tightened her jacket around her. "This place is a death trap," she muttered, casting a wary glance over her shoulder. The neighborhood behind them was eerily silent, as if the park's mere presence smothered any semblance of normality. "Exactly why we're here," Eric replied, grinning as he pulled out his camera. "Think about it. This place has been abandoned for nearly 20 years. Nobody's ever gotten a proper look inside. This is going to make us legends." Lavra sighed, shouldering her own camera bag. She had always been the cautious one, the voice of reason to Eric's reckless thrill-seeking. But she couldn't deny the allure of the decaying amusement park. If they could capture the eerie beauty of the place, it would be their blog's biggest feature yet. The gate creaked as they pushed it open, the sound echoing unnaturally in the heavy silence. The air seemed colder inside, carrying the faint scent of mildew and rust. Shadows stretched unnaturally long, twisting and warping in the moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, a faint sound, metallic chime drifted on the breeze. "Did you hear that?" Lavra whispered, stopping in her tracks. "It's just the wind," Eric said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. They pressed on, the gravel crunching under their boots as they entered the heart of the park. The central plaza was a wasteland of shattered glass, toppled benches, and rusting food carts. Overgrown weeds snaked through cracks in the pavement, reclaiming the space. A twisted balloon, deflated and grimy, hung from a skeletal lamppost, swaying faintly in the breeze. Eric stopped by a cart labeled Candy Kingdom. Its once cheerful colors were now faded, streaked with grime. He wiped the glass window, reviewing trays of lollipops, unnervingly pristine despite decades of abandonment. He pulled out his phone to snap a picture, the flash briefly illuminating the plaza. "Doesn't it bother you how preserved some of this is?" Lavra asked, glancing nervously at the untouched treats. Eric shrugged. "Maybe it's just really good packaging. Or rats haven't gotten to it yet." Before Laura could reply, the faint sound of laughter cut through the silence. It was high-pitched and childlike, echoing from somewhere just beyond the plaza. "Did you hear that?" Laura froze, her flashlight beam darting across the shadows. "Yeah," Eric said, his voice barely above a whisper. He turned toward the source of the sound, a dilapidated merry-go-round at the edge of the plaza. The carousel horses were grotesque in the beam of Laura's flashlight. Their once vivid paint was chipped and peeling, exposing the cracked wood beneath. Each horse's face was twisted in an unnatural grimace, their glass eyes gleaming unnervingly. As they approached, the carousel let out a low groan, its rusted platform shifting slightly as though something unseen had climbed aboard. "Is it moving?" Laura's voice was trembling now. Eric raised his camera, recording as the carousel began to creak and sway. A warped, tinny melody sputtered to life, the notes slow and distorted, like a dying music box. "Okay, we've got enough. Let's move on," Lavra said, her voice sharp with panic. Eric nodded, but as they turned to leave, the carousel abruptly stopped. The silence was deafening. The funhouse loomed ahead, its garish facade cracked and peeling. A grotesque clown face framed the entrance, its gaping mouth forming a dark tunnel. The clown's eyes, half covered in grime, seemed to watch them as they approached. "This is insane," Lara muttered. "We should leave." "We came for a story, and this place is the story," Eric insisted, though his confidence seemed forced. Inside, the air was damp and heavy, thick with the scent of mold. Mirrors lined the walls, their surfaces warped and cracked, reflecting twisted versions of themselves. Lavra shuddered as she caught a glimpse of her reflection. Her face stretched into a grotesque grin, her eyes dark and hollow. She turned away, heart pounding. "Look at this," Eric called from farther down the corridor. He was standing before a mechanical clown, its limbs frozen in a welcoming gesture. Its paint was faded, but its smile was wide and sinister. Lavra approached cautiously, raising her camera. As she snapped a photo, the clown's head twitched. "Did you see that?" She gasped, stumbling backward. Eric frowned. "See what?" It moved, its head. The clown's eyes blinked, a grinding sound emanating from within its chest. Its jaw creaked open, and a distorted voice crackled out. "Welcome back." Lara screamed, grabbing Eric's arm and pulling him toward the exit. Behind them, the mirrors shattered one by one, the sound echoing like gunfire through the narrow halls. The Ferris wheel stood at the edge of the park, its skeletal frame silhouetted against the night sky. Rust streaked the metal, and several of the gondolas dangled precariously from their chains. "Let's climb it," Eric said, his voice shaky but determined. "You can't be serious," Lara said, staring up at the towering structure. "This could be our best shot. Think of the view." Against her better judgment, Lara followed him. The ladder was slick with rust, and every rung groaned under their weight. By the time they reached the top, her hands were raw and trembling. The view was breathtaking in its desolation. The park stretched out below them, a maze of broken attractions and overgrown paths. But something was wrong. "Do you see that?" Lavra asked, pointing toward the plaza. Eric followed her gaze. At the center of the plaza, a group of animatronics stood in a semicircle. Clowns, animals, and humanoid figures motionless yet unnervingly lifelike. "They weren't there before," Eric whispered. As if on cue, the figures began to move. Their joints screeched as they twisted and turned, their glassy eyes scanning the park. One by one, they turned their heads upward, staring directly at the Ferris wheel. "They see us," Lara said, her voice barely audible. The wheel shuddered violently, nearly throwing them off balance. "They're climbing," Eric yelled, pointing at the animatronics scrambling up the wheel supports, their movements jerky and unnatural. They scrambled down, slipping and scraping their hands on the rusted ladder. By the time they reached the ground, the animatronics were closing in. "Run!" Eric shouted, grabbing Laura's hand. They sprinted through the park, their breaths ragged. The attraction seemed to come alive as they passed. The carousel spun wildly, its grotesque horses leaping as if trying to break free. The funhouse glowed with flickering lights, distorted laughter spilling from its entrance. "It's like the park itself is alive," Lara gasped. They reached the gate, but it was gone. In its place was a solid wall of vines and rusted metal, stretching endlessly in both directions. "No, no, no." Eric pounded on the barrier, his fists leaving streaks of blood. A child's voice giggled behind them. "Stay and play." They turned to see a small figure standing in the shadows, its face obscured. As it stepped closer, they realized it wasn't a child at all. It was an animatronic, its plastic face molded into an eerie smile. The laughter grew louder, coming from every direction. The animatronics surrounded them, their movements fluid now, their eyes glowing faintly. "We're not getting out," Eric whispered, his voice trembling. The park lit up, its attractions flickering to life. The air was filled with music, laughter, and the grinding of gears. Above them, the Ferris wheel began to spin, its lights forming a sickly rainbow against the night sky. Lavra dropped her flashlight, its beam illuminating a sign she hadn't noticed before. "Welcome to Wonderland, where the fun never ends."